Pokemon moves tell us a hidden story that we've been missing all along. While some are simple, such as Trevenant turning enemies into trees with Forest's Curse, others, like Bronzong learning Rain Dance as a final move, don't make any sense, until you find out it was worshipped as a deity that summons rain. Deeper than this, Mismagius naturally learns so few moves, but can be taught so many more through TX, much like a witch practicing spells from her book. So after pairing with Professor Kukui to test out the moves of countless Pokemon, I can now bring to you the hidden lore of Pokemon Final Moves. Howdy there, I'm Curlic, and this is yet another video that I've been waiting a very long time to make, so I won't be wasting any time. If you're new here, I use real-life info and in-game lore to find all the answers we need and bring them to you. I'll be trying to use the most recent generation appearances for every Pokemon we discuss, with their most up-to-date move lists as we go through this. Let's just start by jumping in right away with the Bulbasaur line. Their final move is simple to explain as they have Solar Beam. It's made very clear that the whole line focuses on trying to get as much sunlight as possible in order to help the bulb on their back grow and mature. So of course it would all come to a head with the sheer magnificent force of Solar Beam as their final move. Quickly moving on, because we have so many Pokemon to work through, for the Squirtle line we actually have to fully look at Blastoise to understand how it works. And we need to look at the final two moves that it learns, Hydro Pump and Wave Crash. Blastoise is shown to be able to use its cannons as a propulsion device that allows it to fly through the air in a spectacular manner. This even goes as far as being able to carry multiple people and Pokemon within the Adventures manga, but a Hydro Pump can only take you so far before you have to land. And Blastoise may just decide to make a skillful crash landing on top of its foes to make full use of its momentum and force from the high speed of flying, which would then explain Wave Crash, which is also called Wave Tackle, and deals recoil damage back to Blastoise. Alternatively though, in the past we would get Skull Bash as a final move in other generations, which serves as a similar purpose without the recoil damage as a turtle pops out of its shell. Also, before we get too deep, from now on, if I just say the final form of the Pokemon, then assume the entire line has the same final move or final moves. It'll save me some breath and some time. Ironically though, I do now have to talk about each member of the Caterpie line separately, because Caterpie only learns Bug Bite if you keep it from evolving until after level 9, with it normally evolving into Metapod at level 7. A caterpillar like Caterpie is really not typically going to bite unless it's very stressed, especially as it has other means to drive away predators, such as by releasing a foul stench from its horns, which its real-life version does. What we can tie this to is that in the manga, it's explained that keeping a Pokemon from evolving actually causes it pain and stress. So maybe Caterpie is a bit extra stressed out and more prone to biting. Meanwhile, all Metapod knows is hardened because, you know, it's a cocoon. It ain't doing much else in this phase of life. It's not even eating or drinking, so all it can do is get hard in the forest with its homies. But when we end with Butterfree, its final move is Quiver Dance. And we're going to see this a lot, where a move that other Pokemon learn early on is the last move other Pokemon will ever learn. And this is what started to raise question marks in my head and draw my attention towards making this video with one specific Pokemon we'll get to later. The whole reason Butterfree learns Quiver Dance last is to represent the final phase of their life, the time in which they may mate before passing away, because not too long after butterflies, amongst many other creatures, pass on their genetic code to females, the male will pass away. But before they can even do this, they dance in the air, competing in aerial battles against other males as they attract their hopeful mate. Do we know the gender of Ash's Butterfree? That was a male, right? If so, at least we know Butterfree didn't die, or at least their species don't die after mating, assuming it actually did mate after making its big departure. Funny enough, Weedle doesn't learn any new moves as it is born with Poison Sting and String Shot, while Kakuna gains Harden again for obvious reasons. But Beedrill learns Drill Run, a ground-type move. This gives us a number of references to work from, one of them being that as it gets colder, there are many insects, including bees and wasps, that will dig underground for shelter, staying there until everything warms up again. But more than this, in Generation 1, it did not have this move simply because it just didn't exist. And a year after the release of the games, the Pokemon Adventures manga would be in development. A major key Pokemon that is given to Giovanni that goes against all his other Pokemon is, in fact, Beedrill, which he even goes as far as Mega Evolving in future generations because yes, Giovanni is absolutely insanely skilled in the manga and continues to be relevant from time to time. But with Giovanni, we would of course have a team composed of ground types, all of which would be weak to grass Pokemon, water types, so on and so forth. And an easy counter that isn't expected against grass types would be Beedrill. So as move lists got updated, we would eventually see Beedrill with Drill Run, but not until Legends ZA, so take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Otherwise, this is a move that not only thematically matches RB with 2 body-piercing stingers, but also has the ground typing of its move, tying back to Giovanni. Pidgeot is another one that's pretty simple, with Hurricane and Brave Bird as the final moves. From just reading Pokédex entries, we can explain Hurricane. By flapping its wings with all its might, Pidgeot can make a gust of wind capable of bending tall trees. What is that, like an F2, F3 probably, depending on the tree, really. Meanwhile, with Brave Bird is yet another move where a Pokemon is moving at high speeds and slamming into the target, the same as Blastoise. This is because Pidgeot is also stated in the dex to be able to fly at Mach 2, which is twice the speed of sound. So something crashing into you at those speeds is something that's gonna hurt a lot. It's also sometimes easier to just tackle something with your full force rather than trying to slash at it with your claws, with golden eagles striking prey at high speeds and other birds buffeting targets with their wings, or straight up kicking if they aren't just using their pointy beaks, so there's a lot of options available. Raticate gets Endeavor as its last move, which is actually directly translated as Daredevil. This move cuts down an enemy's health down to then be roughly equal to the user's health. This is less about anything other than mice being able to climb and scurry across all kinds of surfaces, hence the move name being Daredevil. It matches well with other Pokemon such as high-flying Pokemon in the form of Staraptor, or even Pokemon more inclined to take risks, whether that be for a determined goal like Kyurem, or just to show off like Hawlucha, or Pyroar showing off to a mate. Others are just more durable in their environments or are constantly in danger, as we see with Solosis, who is incredibly durable and can survive any environment, and Wishiwashi, who is, well, again, constantly in danger. So this move is a very interesting bin of reasons as to why Raticate may have this as its final move, especially as a hardy, opportunistic omnivore that is going to be at the bottom of the food chain, moreover Rattata, and is not afraid to take risks to get what it wants. Fearow, much like Beedrill, did not originally have its final move as its final move in the first generation, but now it has the move Drill Run, which has become a very special move of its own to decimate foes. And this doubles down as we see its semi-final move, Drill Peck, be used in the manga. I guarantee that even if you haven't read the manga, that you've seen Fearow using Drill Peck on a Poliwhirl, becoming a very infamous scene that makes it look like there's way stronger violence in the manga, and yeah, I guess there kinda is depending on the generation, but this Poliwhirl never actually got stabbed like this, so don't worry, it's okay. I'm honestly not surprised to see a Pokemon with such a long and pointed beak be the one to turn itself into a flying drill and pierce through its foes, so makes perfect sense to me and is pretty simple. Arbok's final 2 moves are important because it gets Coil and then Gunk Shot, like a snake defending its body by drawing it close before spitting out acidic venom to keep threats at bay. But why can it do this? Well, it's because Arbok is a Cobra, as evidenced by it literally being called the Cobra Pokemon and its name being Cobra backwards, but with a K instead of a C. Who would have guessed? Long history of everyone knowing that. But there are, in fact, Cobras out there capable of spitting venom at their foes. The only issue with this is that in order for the venom to be effective, it has to hit their target right in the eyes, which is something that is noted to take a ton of brain power to figure out, but certain species of Asiatic and African cobras have evolved to be able to do it anyway. And now we have an 11.5 foot, 143 pound snake doing this. I don't think it's gonna have a problem hitting us in the eyes or the rest of our body. We get some different final moves for Pikachu's lining, starting with Pichu, whose final move is Charm. This can be said about Cleffa and Igglybuff as well, with all 3 of these Pokemon lines belonging to the Fairy A group, while also being baby Pokemon in these specific forms. And I guess babies have their own charm. I'm here or there with them, personally speaking. But as we move on to Pikachu, it picks up Thunderbolt as its final move. This is, of course, a direct reference to Ash and Pikachu, since that is the move. The one that always puts an end to the big battles, the common denominator that brings repetitive comfort to the human brain by capping out the climax of an episode with one big blast from Pokemon's mascot. Strangely though, Thunderbolt is weaker and technically the last move that Raichu learns. But that gets into weird territory since it learns it at level 5. But hold the phone, because for the first time, you can have Pichu, Pikachu, or Raichu learn Volt Tackle by level up within Legend ZA by having them reach level 99, which is genuinely one of the sickest things because there is was originally a process you have to follow for this to happen with breeding, items, and events in the real world. Of course, Volt Tackle is the other major signature move of Pikachu in the anime, making it clear why they did all this, and of course that leads into the super special Z move that Pikachu specifically has. Sandslash and its Alolan form do have two different final moves, but both of them are incredibly easy to understand, with regular Sandslash having Earthquake just because it spends so much time underground, and an opposite to this for its Alolan form, we actually have two different stories. One for Alolan Sandshrew, which learns Blizzard, a great way to provide camouflage for yourself and give yourself the advantage, but then Alolan Sandslash technically has Icicle Spear as its final move, something that lines up with its Dex entry, which specifically states its steel spikes are sheathed in ice. Stabs from these spikes cause deep wounds and severe frostbite as well. Steel spikes covered in ice, that really does fit the idea of Icicle Spear pretty well, I'd say. I'd also say I never want to get stabbed by that. It's like a Elden Ring weapon. No, thank you. Things get a little more complicated with the Nidoran lines. On one hand, both male and female Nidoran alongside Nidorina and Nidorino all get the move Earth Power, which lines up in some capacity considering they are all partially inspired by rabbits. Hence why they have the big ears, the buck teeth, and then evolve via a moonstone. Rabbits are known to be natural burrowers that will use their burrows for safety from weather and predators, which allows them to further keep their babies safe, which these Pokemon do have litters of if we go by what we see in the TCG art. It is even directly stated that these Pokemon, moreover Nidorina, do burrow, so it lines up incredibly well. But when they do evolve into Nidoqueen or Nidoking via that Moonstone, things get a little different. On one hand, Nidoqueen's move upon level up is Super Power, whereas all other moves are given at level 1. So technically this might not be a quote-unquote final move, but it is the one that stands out in the move list. I don't plan to explain this for every single other Pokemon going forward, so just try to remember that for me, please. Saves me breath. Knee-jerk reaction for me is to just say that it gets superpower because moms are strong, and that's partially what's going on here. But because it is noted in the dex that Nidoqueen is at its strongest, is when we get this answer, which is when it is protecting its young. Superpower is a move that has incredible damage, but also lowers the user's attack and defense stats afterwards. This, in my mind, is equatable to hysteric strength, a phenomenon that occurs when someone's adrenaline kicks into the max and they're capable of doing things like lifting cars off of children. After an event like this, the body comes down from the adrenaline, and then the pain from straining the muscles starts to kick back in. Muscles hurt, you feel weaker, all very much lining up with this superpower attack and the after effects of it. Alternatively to this though, Nidoking gets the move Mega Horn. I bet there's no way at all to figure out why it gets that move. Totally isn't because of the absolutely massive beacon of a horn that it has on its head. No, it is. Clefairy and Clefable get a little complicated as well because in Scarlet and Violet, Clefairy's last two moves are Moonblast and Healing Wish. While in Legends ZA, it's Moonblast and Double Edge. Then Clefable gets Moonblast, Air Slash, and Double Edge as the last three moves, so what's even going on here? Moonblast makes the most sense. Clefairy are suspected to come from the moon, if not space in general. They represent the moon rabbit through and through, even having those big ol' ears to boot. We can also easily attribute it getting Healing Wish to the idea of wishing upon a star, again another tied to space. But then Air Slash is where it seems like it's only thrown in because, you know, Mega Clefairy gains the flying typing and levitates all the time, so I can't really figure anything out there. Meanwhile, Double Edge, it's a bit of a stretch admittedly, but it does kind of look like a meteor crash in some versions of the move in games, but definitely not all of them. As such, believe what you will regarding these guys, and Moonblast and Healing Wish are the only ones that make perfect sense. Vulpix in particular gets Fire Blast, which its actual name is Daimonji, which is another name for the 5 mountainous send-off fires. While there's a million things that can be said about this, it's most importantly something that is thought to be ancient, relating then to the long life that Vulpix will live as they grow new tails as they become older and eventually evolve into 9 tails. It's even said to be born with 1 tail at the very start, though this in turn very much relates to the Kitsune, of which this line is very much inspired by. Though Alolan Vulpix simply just gets Blizzard in turn, not surprising then when it actively uses its breath to consistently freeze the air around it to make things more comfortable for itself. But once again, when these Pokemon evolve into Ninetales, it's strange. Its original form doesn't have any moves that stand out in particular, as multiple moves are known at level 1 or have to be given back through remembering the move. Fire Blast is the strongest of them all, so it may just have the same story here. For Alolan Ninetales though, we get Dazzling Gleam as the standout move, lining up with its ability Aurora Veil, a creature that incidentally puts on a dazzling display and would be revered as a deity before people realized that there were multiple of them out on the mountains. Nevertheless, it still holds a strong significance as a guardian of the mountain that it resides on, and is regarded as well as a beautiful sight to behold. Jigglypuff has its Scarlet and Violet moveset, and then the ZA movesets that differ in the finale, but they're all very fitting. Hyper Voice and Perish Song to match the strong singing capabilities it has, if not to represent the peak of its singing power. Then we follow with Moonblast because, once again, it is a rabbit of sorts, which becomes clear as it does evolve into Wigglytuff, and it gets Double Edge, which once again is a move we could stretch and relate to a crashing meteor, especially as we're now starting to see a pattern. But when it's Wigglytuff, the last moves are Perish Song and Move Blast, so again, it just repeats our pattern from before. Honestly, I will not be surprised if we keep seeing this pattern of Moonblast and Double Edge as a final set of moves for fairy types. Not only because Moonblast is a good fairy move, but also because of the whole concept of many fairy types being very alien in their concept or being from space directly. For Zubat and Golbat, their final move is Leech Life, an incredibly fitting move for a Pokemon that is inspired by the vampire bat and its ability to drink exclusively blood as it lives its life. It's a very unique ability in nature and requires the animal to be able to process the iron in blood differently than everything else in nature, lest they basically get iron poisoning. But when it evolves into Crobat, we once again get Brave Bird as the final move, which it's a bit strange, considering it's flying faster but more silently with elegance and with the ability to take blood without you noticing. But this might just be a common denominator amongst flying types that state they move very fast. I actually love Oddish's last 2 moves, which are also shared with Gloom, being Moonlight and Petal Dance. Oddish is noted to only come out at night where the sunlight is less harsh, though to be factual to Pokemon, it does specifically state that it absorbs moonlight, which doesn't actually exist in our world, but does exist in Pokemon. Lunala is our case in point for that, transforming sunlight into moonlight. And also getting Petal Dance is super fitting because it's like it's learning to dance before it would evolve into either of its 2 forms, Vileplume or Blossom, who they in turn then have Petal Blizzard as their standout move. Petal Blizzard is actually directly translated from Japanese as Cherry Blossom Blizzard, taking it from something that just represents leaves to actually representing the sweet and distinct scent left in the air by cherry blossoms when they bloom and release their petals. Vileplume might not say anything about its smell, but it does release a big boom of toxic pollen, and since it is inspired by the Rafflesia, you'd expect the smell to be fairly awful. Meanwhile, antithesis to this, Blossom becomes more beautiful with its flowers if it evolves from a stinkier smelling Gloom. It does state that their petals make a pleasant ringing sound as well when they're rubbed together, so I wonder if a Cherry Blossom Blizzard attack would also result in a serene cacophony of sound. Parasect's final 4 moves are an absolute wonder, with Spore, Rage Powder, X-Scissor, and Energy Ball, though it depends on whether it's Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, or Legends Arceus in which we look at for this. Any powder makes perfect sense since Parasect puts mushroom spores onto its newly hatched children to continue the life cycle of their species and the Tochukaso mushroom. It's interesting that it uses Energy Ball though, because Parasect is known for being a parasite that draws nutrients from tree roots, for example. And by this, we also see that Energy Ball is used by drawing energy from nature and weaponizing it. Meanwhile, X-Scissor is just explained by Parasect having sharp, pointed claws, or rather, I should say, big, meaty claws! Moving on, to my surprise, Venomoth has Psychic as its final move, but I actually love this. There are lots of Pokemon out there that have moves and other typings, and one common theme you might find is that a lot of nocturnal Pokemon will have Psychic type moves available to them. This is just because the moon is often associated with psychic power, amongst other themes we've discussed. To follow this, we can even see that Sabrina has a Venomoth on her team since the very first generation, really bringing the psychic connection home. Dugtrio and its Alolan form cap out their move list with Fissure right after learning Earthquake. Now, of course, this is just a natural progression to get a stronger move, even though Fissure will basically never hit because if it's not 100%, it's 0%. But you can easily find the natural tie here. A strong enough Earthquake can cause faults and cracks, rupturing the surface as a fissure is created and giving the Earth a permanent ground deformation. I actually loved learning about faults and reverse faults and stuff like that when I was in college because I was prepared to minor in geology, and it all made sense to me mentally as I was taught how to look at layers and figure out what events happened in what order, though that definitely has to be more complicated in Pokemon considering all the moves that they have. Ultimately, it's an easy connection as they're known for digging through the ground, and their sudden presence en masse may be seen as an omen for a major earthquake or volcanic eruption soon to appear. After all, they're going to feel it first, since they would be closer to the Earth's plates grinding against each other. Every single Meowth and Persian learn Play Rough as their final move, which is no different than a cat that has played for too long or has been pet for too long and has decided that it's tired of your presence attacking you. The only outlier, though, is actually Berserker, which has Thrash or Outrage as its final move. But even that is fitting because it's supposed to represent the Berserker, a warrior in history that often loses itself to rage and blasts through the enemy lines non-stop until they run out of energy. Outrage itself has solid power, and it lasts for 2 to 3 turns as the user attacks by going on a rampage, to then result at the end in the user being confused due to fatigue. Perfectly fitting. Golduck gets Wonder Room, which by looking at base stats makes 0 sense at all since there's only a 2-point difference between its 2 stats that Wonder Room affects. Although, at least as a Psyduck, it learns Amnesia right before this, which raises its special defense. The move is described as the user creates a bizarre area in which Pokemon's defense and special defense stats are swapped for 5 turns, which I can only make one tie to this through the Pokedex, which states that Psyduck specifically may exhibit odd powers with its headaches, and even that is honestly a bit of a stretch. I tried to tie it to the Psyduck that made people float in the Pokemon Detective Pikachu movie, but Psyduck had Wonder Room as its final move ever since Unova, which came out a number of years before that movie. I genuinely don't have an explanation for this other than the constant attributes of this Pokemon being called weird or strange by the Pokedex due to it having psychic powers, but maybe you'll know. If there are any additional explanations I miss, or maybe I get something wrong, let me know in the comments, as not only would I love to learn more, but also comments appease the mighty algorithm. So do likes, hypes, and sharing the video. Also, likes rather help me know that you want to see more videos like this. And before we do continue, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this far, subscribe for weeks worth of deep dive content, and let me know what move you would want as your final move in Pokemon. I think I would choose Amnesia as a joke then, because then at the end, when I learn it last, I could theoretically forget all of my moves and start completely from scratch, which I think is hilarious. I like that. In addition, I want to say thank you to the members of the channel for the extra support. If you want early access to videos, members exclusive videos, and behind the scenes info, become a member for as little as $3 a month, and it goes an incredibly long way to help the channel. But with that then, as always, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. Annihilape has a very fitting move for the line's final moves, being either Final Gambit or Dynamic Punch. With this line being Pokemon that fly into fits of rage and continue to rage on until they run out of energy, it's no surprise that a fully concentrated attack like Dynamic Punch would be used. It being inaccurate is no surprise, since Primate is used to throwing out a bunch of punches rather than one good attack. it leaving a target confused without fail could maybe be tied to getting hit hard enough to leave us befuddled. The couple of, birds that go around our head. A little bit of brain damage goes a long way, and this Pokemon does have a lot of strength. Alternatively, Final Gambit does damage equal to the remaining HP of the user, and then the user will faint, which, of course, Primeape that have used Rage Fist enough will pass away and turn into Annihilape, but there have been Primeapes that do die from their rage without ever shedding their mortal coil and evolving into this terrifying, angry soul. The Sun Pokédex was the first to say this, stating it has been known to become so angry that it dies as a result. Its face looks peaceful in death, however. So, not every death of a Primeape will result in an even angrier Pokemon. Both regular and Hisuian Growlithe have Flare Blitz as their final move, representing this puppy learning how to first cloak itself in fire as part of the dances it will perform in its evolved form as they battle others. When it evolves into Cantonian Arcanine, it has extreme speed as an outlier move, which ties to Arcanine being known for its high-speed movement as noted by the Pokédex, noting specifically that it can travel over 6,200 miles in a single day and night, which, yeah, that's pretty freaking fast, as that amounts to roughly 258 miles per hour or 415 kilometers an hour. Though, more interesting than this is that Hisuian Arcanine caps things out with the move Raging Fury, which I had no idea even existed as a move. It's actually directly translated as Great Infuriation and was introduced during Legends Arceus, only belonging to Hisuian Arcanine, Infernape, and Gouging Fire. It's a move that the user becomes fixated on using until the battle ends, similarly to Outrage, as it even becomes confused afterwards. This is incredibly fitting for a Pokemon like Hisuian Arcanine, who is supposed to represent the guardian that is the Komainu, a fierce protector that is often given statues composed of stone and other materials. Rock typing, hint hint. They are known to exhibit incredible power and be fierce when they decide to act in defense of the things that they love. They've even been known to dance, which Hisuian Arcanine exhibits in its normal battle. I just love this Pokemon and talking about its inspiration because it actually does go all the way back to its origins within India, so maybe we'll see more of it in a region coming up. Poliwag and Poliwhirl use their big round bodies as a drum by using Belly Drum, then slam into their opponent's full force with Double Edge. Pretty straightforward. When you know your body, you use it to your advantage. It's not like they have big arms or legs to be throwing punches or kicks out with, but when it does evolve into Poliwrath, of course it becomes muscle-bound, allowing it to throw out a strong right hook dynamic punch. Same reasoning as we had with Annihilape's line, which, I will say now, the Machop line is the exact same, following a pattern of physically strong Pokemon throwing one very powerful punch. Politoed, lastly, gets Bounce. It's a Toad. Who would have guessed? But, to be fair, all of our other frogs in this line really don't bounce around like a regular frog would. Instead, they walk around and build up different kinds of muscles. Even the physical anatomy in their feet and calves are different, flat feet versus the heels and toes that we would then see on Politoed. There's a pun there somewhere about Politoed having multiple toes, and I'm just not here for it. Abra doesn't really count as it only has Teleport, but both Kadabra and Alakazam finish with Future Sight and Calm Mind, which makes me think that they are using this outside of battle. Either they are seeing the future and it is calming to them, or they are seeing the future and have to use Calm Mind in order to quell the sheer amount of anxiety they have over what they saw and how it might be how the universe ends, as they saw far too much into the future. We'll never know the answer. All we know is that it's preparing for something. The Victreebel line's closer is split between Power Whip, Leaf Blade, Leaf Storm, and if you want to extend it to earlier moves, Sludge Wave. Leaf Blade and Storm are pretty straightforward and need no explanation. A Power Whip is thanks to the incredibly long vine that grows from the top of Victreebel and would eventually be incredibly important for keeping the acid within its body inside of it as it mega evolves. Speaking of said acid, by the way, that's what's getting poured out all over any Pokemon getting hit by Sludge Wave, which it just has in place of Gastro Acid since it doesn't get that move in ZA, but has it in Scarlet and Violet. It's pretty scary then seeing how this acid does have the ability to dissolve anything even before mega evolving. Its Pokédex says it can even dissolve bone, which you would need some pretty powerful stuff like, I don't know, hydrochloric acid to be able to completely dissolve bone. and I say that from experience. That stuff hurts even in super low concentrations. This is not me admitting to being a murderer, this is me saying that I had to use this acid diluted down to 1/10 of its concentration in order to get phosphorus off of glass equipment, and it would still burn within seconds of touching my skin. Meaning the acid inside of Victreebel will hurt immensely if you aren't immediately evaporated into nothing but a clump of nutrients for it to absorb, though the acid inside of our stomachs is pretty powerful as well, maybe not that strong, of course, and the only reason that it doesn't burn us from the inside, or dissolve us rather, is because of the lining inside of our stomach. Whoopee. I'm amazed it took this long for a Pokemon's actual final move to be Hydro Pump, as we look at Tentacruel, a Pokemon representing jellyfish, as its body is likely 99% water, just like Tentacool is said to be. The 1% that is left is apparently the organ that produces the poison that it uses. Kind of a no-brainer then, as it also has Sludge Wave as the semi-final move, meaning it's first coating you in poison, then using up the stored water in its body. But just wait a minute, because I found out something wild. It's that this Sludge Wave is theoretically possible in the real world. There is the upside-down jellyfish, which releases venom-filled blobs of mucus into the surrounding water, acting like venomous sea mines that the prey can then run into. We also might run into it, and it makes you feel tingles, itchiness, and then painful discomfort. It's not dangerous to us outside of killing a few skin cells, but it will kill the small prey that this bad boy is looking to consume and deter anyone looking to make a meal of this jelly. Golem and its Alolan line have a triple threat ending with Explosion, Double Edge, and Stone Edge. The first one is because, at least revealed through Graveler, we find out that if they touch water, they have the chance of just exploding. This is just Pokemon telling us that they have super dry bodies, and the water being thrown in will just instantly hydrate them in a very bad way. Meanwhile, Stone and Double Edge are just rock puns at the end of the day. They have a lot of edges on their body, and they're made of stone. Go figure. Rapidash is easy with Flare Blitz, another Pokemon running at high speeds and using fire in its arsenal as a means of defending itself. But with Galarian Rapidash, we have Healing Wish, which instead of relating to stars, it directly relates to unicorns, since, you know, that's exactly what this Pokemon is. Unicorns were in legends supposed to have incredible powers, one of them being that their horns were fabled to be a panacea, well, however you say that word, a cure-all. And this is actually a reason as to why so many horned creatures that do exist are hunted for their horns as our real-life quote-unquote mermaids. Unfortunately, the people who do that are incredibly stupid and don't realize that for rhinos, they're just consuming the equivalent of fingernails and are doing an incredible amount of harm to these poor animals. Nevertheless, the wish is technically from us, and then Galarian Rapidash then proceeds to heal those that are in need. For the Slowpoke line, I'm going to use the Scarlet Violet list as there are a number of moves that are left out with ZA. The whole line, including its regional form, gets Rain Dance and Heal Pulse as their final moves. Rain Dance relates to the idea that a Slowpoke's yawn will summon rain. At first, I never really understood why this is the case, but at least in Pokopia, it seems like the more human things are, the more comfortable it is for Slowpoke, and higher humidity might result in a higher chance of rain, since the air is saturated with water, but it still needs the right conditions to condense and form clouds for a storm. Super oversimplifying it, but that's effectively the science. Heal Pulse is weird because I want to tie it into this line's ability to just heal its tail back after injury, but it's gotta be more than that. The only thing that's viable is that humanity has looked at salamanders and other creatures' ability to regenerate their bodies and have studied them to try and mimic this incredible ability, but since Gen 9, they've received what are currently seen as signature moves, with Chilly Reception being attributed to Slowking, even though it and its Galarian form are capable of learning it, and I actually really love it. The user is described as telling a chillingly bad joke before switching places with a party Pokemon in waiting. This summons a snowstorm lasting 5 turns, and you cannot convince me that this does not relate to the Slowking we find in the Pokemon 2000 movie, where we have a Slowking telling a few jokes and just chilling in the snow, wishing he had some pants. Also, that pun about chilling in the snow was not on purpose, but I'm leaving it in. To follow though, Eerie Spell is the signature move to its Galarian form, which it is effectively a curse that strikes with tremendous power and removes 3 points from the target's last used move. Just for note though, it does say tremendous power, but only has 80 base power, but it is a sound-based move as well, really driving home the chanting and incantations that this Pokemon unleashes upon the world and its foes. Magnezone comes in with absolute heat as its final two moves are Lock On and Zap Cannon. Being a Pokemon often associated with the advancements of mankind, this isn't shocking. But it's amazing to see something so effective and simple. Lock onto your target, and then use your strongest move. Don't waste any time. It's actually even encouraged in Pokemon contests, as if you use it in this order, then you score double the normal amounts of appeal, so that's neat. For Farfetch'd, I sleep. It ends with Agility and Brave Bird, but when its Galarian form evolves into Surfetch'd, it instead ends with Meteor Assault. This is its signature move, the final move that it learns, and is actually called Star Assault in direct translation. 150 base damage, 100% accuracy fighting type move that needs a recharge afterwards. It's a better Hyper Beam with physical attack that is only possible with this Pokemon's gallant full power charge with, and I quote, its thick leak. It does the full pose as if it's an anime character after a clash, or, on horses after the clash. But I assume the only reason it has Meteor or Star as part of its name is because it comes crashing in. I also have a feeling that editing acrylic will have used the very stupid Farfetch'd shot where it's just holding the stupid leak near its crotch, because let's be real, I can't resist an easy joke. Dugtrio closes with Thrash, a move that's pretty fitting for a Pokemon that constantly fights with its other heads over things like what direction to go or who gets to eat, even though they share the same stomach. Though this Pokemon is all about efficiency. 3 heads, 3 hearts, 3 sets of lungs, all so they can oxygenate their bodies amazingly and run for longer periods of time. The heads take turns being alert, so they can get rest and aren't snuck up on. And I imagine that in battle, it would be a constant barrage, or rather, in this case, thrashing, as the 3 heads constantly attack without letting up or giving you time to breathe. I'm also starting to learn a lot of different moves here, I admit. I play Nuzlocke and look at Ecology, but this is the first time I've really had to look at moves this deeply. For example, I've never heard of the move Snowscape, which is Dugong's Closer, a move that makes a snowstorm lasting 5 turns guaranteed. Another no-brainer, it likes colder lands, it's well adapted to them, let's bring the cold to the battlefield. Mach and its Alolan counterparts have Belch and Memento as their final moves, which is hilarious because it's just burping and then dying. But there's way more of an interesting reason to this than you might expect. This means that, biologically, chemically speaking, whatever, that gases are being produced by whatever, again, chemical and biological reactions are occurring inside of this Pokemon. And ever since my Toxic Ecology video, I have claimed that these Pokemon, amongst many others, are the final bastion of cleaning a world. Yeah, they might create or, cause a lot of damage, but it's just because it's concentrated in one spot as they come to life. Over time, they will aim to absorb more, but they are directly noted to have biological reactions happening within them at all times. And at least with regular Mach, if it runs out, then they die. Probably the same for chemical reactions in Alolan Mach. This belching is a direct sign of that, and of course with one last reaction, with one last burp, Mach will pass away through symbolic use of the move Memento, but it goes even further than this, because as I shared this with a group of others who love digging into Pokemon lore, one known as Mouse Science pointed out that Memento is incredibly fitting, as even after Mach dies, it has already left traces of itself in the land that has been rendered infertile and destroyed by Mach's toxins for years to come as a memento of its existence. Shellder has Hydro Pump as its final move, which easily ties into bivalves clapping their shells to create jet propulsion as they swim underwater. We all thought SpongeBob was making that up, but nope, it's actually real. Meanwhile, Icicle Spear used to be the signature move of Cloyster, hence why it's the final move for it to learn. This represents its ability to launch its big ol' horn at targets in quick volleys, which is far more devastating in the Pokemon Adventures manga, as it is even used to drill through rock. It's my boy, Gengar. I do get surprised when people ask what my favorite Pokemon is when I have a Gengar shrine behind me, but whatever, that's okay. I think it gets blocked by my chair. A decent amount from the looks of it. A constant through the Scarlet and Violet move list is that the final move it learns is Dream Eater, which is wild, because I don't know anyone who would dare to use it, but While it isn't a signature move, it was something that was given a massive scene within the manga thanks to Agatha and her Gengar attacking Blue. The visual we're given is insane, encasing Blue in a floating translucent coffin with gas swirling around him as Gengar is effectively preparing to put Blue out of his misery. Though, to be entirely fair, this has been its final move since the first generation, making it reach the creep factor that many ghost Pokemon are meant to hit. Easy and funny, because Onix and Steelix are constantly burrowing into the ground with their heads first, their final move is Head Smash. I don't think it gets easier than that. Hypno might admittedly be a little bit of a stretch because it gets Future Sight as its final move, and the only thing I can mentally tie to it is telling someone what they're going to do when you put them under hypnosis, which, hold on, I think I have a pocket watch somewhere around here. I do. Look at me, I'm a fake professor and a state alchemist now. You will subscribe to the channel and share it with all your friends in need of long-form content to get through their chores and workday. Seriously though, it's like really all I've got for Hypno other than, you know, Future Sight, oh my god, being a psychic type stereotype. The Big King Crab learns Crab Hammer and Guillotine as its final moves with Kingler. There is nothing more fitting than that, I'd say, but I do have to question Guillotine a little bit. At least I did, until I found out that the full direct translation of the move is Pincer Guillotine. Then everything just kind of fell right back into place, especially as once something is finally in its big old claw, it's lights out. I have a feeling any crab we run into throughout this will be kind of the same way. Explosion, Gyro Ball, Mirror Coat. If you guessed this belonged to Electrode, you've won absolutely nothing because I have no way of knowing you knew that before I said it, but Explosion is a no-brainer. With Gyro Ball, it's just a nice high-speed spin that takes advantage of its weight and momentum, which is kind of wild. Right before writing this section, I watched the first episode of Steel Ball Run, and God, I need that injected directly into more of my eyes. I'm just now imagining Electrode spinning like one of Gyro Zeppeli's steel balls, and now you know why it's called Gyro. Or why he's called Gyro, rather. Either way, moving on, Mirror Coat is just polishing your balls. I mean, Electrode polishing itself, which is really strange to me, but we'll come back to why soon, because he's to an Electrode, or at least with it, it gets grassy terrain instead. This changes the ground to grass and helps boost a number of growth or nature-related moves and abilities. This, in turn, relates to the Hisuian variants being related to Seed Bombs, which is only clearer with the Dex noting it has seeds inside of its body. Seed Bombs were used to spread, well, seeds. In specific, the Japanese seed bomb, also known as Tsuchidango, or Earth Dumplings, is a concept that originated in Japan. It was popularized by Masanobu Fukuoka. It involves creating a small, self-contained sphere made from a mixture of clay, compost, and seeds. The clay acts as a protective casing for the seeds, while the compost provides nutrients for germination. This method was initially used by farmers and later adopted by guerrilla gardeners to plant seeds in hard-to-reach areas. Also, the phrase guerrilla gardener, I wasn't ready for that. The effectiveness of seed bombs lie in their ability to transform barren urban spaces into green patches, attracting pollinators and enhancing the ecological balance of the area. So then, long story short, when this bad boy goes boom, it's spreading seeds, which really makes me think that the modern Voltorb and Electrode aren't their casings. They aren't the thing that we see, and that their Mirror Coat might be a way for them to attract other animals that they can explode around and then spread their seed. There was no way for me to get around that sexual innuendo. There are fruits, to defend myself, that do explode in nature to the same effect, and I'm confident the real Voltorb and Electrode is whatever is inside this thing, and what we see is just a casing or a fruit of some sorts. Execute took me a second because it has Worry Seed and Solar Beam. The latter of the two is easily explained by a number of things, since these are just seeds. But Worry Seed is the semi-finale because if a group of Execute is ever missing a member of their team, then they get incredibly nervous and will even invite another Pokemon into their group to feel comfortable again. Growth and Stomp stand out as Executor's moves, which is just another funny joke since it has no arms, so all it can really do is stomp around. Meanwhile, its Alolan form has Dragon Hammer, which used to be its signature move, and I mean, look at Alolan Executor and put a hammer next to it. Then imagine the two of them swinging with their heads. What else are you gonna do when you want to hit something anyway and you have that long of a neck? Especially if it's on the ground. Like, giraffes aren't that different since they swing their heads at each other, and Alolan Executor just wants to take the express route with downward momentum. Marowak is even more sad than I had already thought, because of course a Marowak is meant to be the parent who protects their young one last time in their time of need before passing away. The semi-final move is Double Edge, being of course a strong move, as we've discussed, that deals great damage to the opponent, but also hurts the user. Something that seems like a last resort, especially as the final move that Marowak learns is Perish Song, the true last-ditch effort. In using Perish Song, while we can look at the mechanic of it, I'd like to see it as even more than this, as the last peaceful song that she sings for her child to tell Cubone everything is gonna be okay. A song that will leave Cubone in tears and even explain why Cubone cries at the full moon and sees its mother in that moon. But for its Alolan form, it gains one more move as its final move, now being Flare Blitz, representing the soul of the mother coming back and being used to power the flames of Alolan Marowak in battle as a sort of revenant. I will admit the dex entries get a little bit weird here. In some entries it makes it sound like the Marowak has called its mother back down and uses her power. In others, it sounds like she returns to the earth of her own will, so do with that information what you will. The Tyrogue line all gets pretty varied as you would expect, each one specializing in their own skills, with the exception of Tyrogue, as nothing stands out, but that is also to be expected of the Pokemon that has the open ability to evolve into 3 other Pokemon once it has chosen a path of martial art. For Hitmonchan, close combat, counter, and focus punch is nothing more than a boxing match, staying in close combat, dodging, and countering, and then ending with a strong punch that leaves the opponent with birds flying around their heads as they are knocked out. For Hitmonlee, we get high jump kick and axe kick, which is almost like a high impact move that closes the distance, and while the opponent is reeling, you bring the leg up and bring down the heel of your foot, which will be a lot stronger than most other kicks. Doing it the right way also is apparently more of an expert thing, but I genuinely would not know. I have not been traditionally trained in anything. I've only ever been taught how to fight dirty, which you don't really get taught. You get exemplified how to fight dirty. Lastly, Hitmontop closes with Endeavor, once again being a daredevil, which definitely relates to how it fights spinning on its head, which its entire dance fighting style is also a reference to capoeira. I never really saw that as a daredevil fighting, but it was used by slaves in Brazil to secretly train themselves in the art of combat and then fight their way to freedom, so we can absolutely add that as a compliment of being daredevils. I once again almost lost it because Licky Licky has Power Whip, and then Belly Drum as its final moves, which its tongue is the whip as it extends it out to grab prey or whatever food it wants, and once it has ensnared and eaten them, it just pats its stomach with happiness as it's now full. I swear I'm not going crazy. I cannot make this up. This is literally its Sword and Shield move list. I love it. Following in Muck's footsteps though, Weezing has Explosion, Memento, and Destiny Bond as its final 3. These bad boys are full of deadly and explosive gases that they are also born from, so of course they explode and leave a memento of themselves behind with toxic air. Though with their death and the spreading of toxic gases, they have tied their own fate to yours, as you will die with them, whether you caused it or they did it themselves. Or, you know, maybe you'll just faint. I'm being overdramatic, but that's like on par for the course here. Although, with its Galarian variant, all those moves get bumped back one, and instead Misty Terrain takes the final move slot, and I love it all over again. The Misty Terrain is meant to represent the purified air that Galarian Weezing releases, which is cool and all, but when we look in the woods where we find Zacian and Zamazenta, the entire place is foggy, with only one Pokemon being the cause of it, as we have our Weezing here. There's actually an entire group of Pokemon working together in this area to keep our slumbering dog safe, but if you want that explanation, go check out my Ecology of Galar video. Rhyhorn and Rhydon have Mega Horn and Hornjo for very obvious reasons that also line up with their tendency to break through rock with their horns. But Rhyperior closes out with Rock Wrecker, once again a move I had never actually heard of before, but here we are. And it turns out this move has been around since Rhyperior's introduction in Generation 4, and it is directly translated as Rock Cannon, where it launches a massive boulder at its enemy and then has to rest afterwards. It's just got this energy of, hey babe, check out this big rock I can lift. Though, to be fair, Rhyperior literally has multiple dex entries stating that it can lift up rocks and launch them as its arms, acting like cannons. So this is just representative of that description. Similarly to other babies, Happiny learns Charm last, but Chansey and Blissey get a trio of moves that thematically match with Soft Boiled, Last Resort, and Healing Wish, which is made clear to us anytime we've been shown a Pokemon Center in the anime. But this has gone further, as we'll find them on routes with a lot of baby Pokemon as well, which might even explain their Last Resort move. They go all out to keep others safe at sacrifice of themselves. And while Healing Wish works into that nurse role, Soft Boiled is there because these Pokemon are noted to give their eggs to others. The eggs are noted to be incredibly nutritious and filling, but are also filled with so much happiness and joy that people who eat it can't help but smile. I'm gonna chalk that up as some sort of a serotonin boosting egg, and we're gonna move on. Ingrain and Grassy Terrain are Tangrowth's final moves, which genuinely makes me think of the invasive kudzu plant. I've talked about this multiple times in multiple videos, but this Pokemon's ability to constantly grow vines from its body, it having ancient power to evolve from Tangela into Tangrowth, and the history of the kudzu really makes this line up for me mentally. And now we've thrown in Ingrain, which is strongly related to deep roots, while Grassy Terrain is greatly spreading its overall reach. There are likely other explanations, but the coincidences have been coincidenting a little too much, and I'm thinking it's intentional at this point. We have another strong mother that flies into a rampage to protect her babies in the form of Kangaskhan. This is exemplified with Outrage and Dynamic Punch, and while we might be able to just knock this Pokemon out in battle, in lore we get a different story. When in danger, no matter how tired or how beaten up, a mother Kangaskhan will continue to fight and not faint until her baby is safe. Burned, poisoned, heavily injured, none of it matters. She protects to the very end in a violent rage. It's also recommended to not try and catch its baby if you ever run into them in the wild, or else that will also trigger a violent rampage, making perfect sense why it gets Outrage. Also, you might be saying, oh wait, it gets Outrage, that's a dragon type move. It is a monster Pokemon, or at least rather in the Monster A group, and interestingly enough, Monster A group has the most Pokemon that also exist in the Dragon A group. What that means, I might be talking about in the future, but not now. Horsea and Seadra hint at their dragon genetics and their eventual ability to summon storms, as Dragon Dance and Rain Dance are their final moves. This goes as far back as the Gold Dex entry stating an examination of its cells revealed the presence of a gene not found in Horsea, and as such it became a hot topic. There are a lot of ancient genetics that are unlocked in Pokemon that relate to them becoming dragons. A lot of the time it is related to serpents, lizards, and then stereotypical dragons, of course. But it does make you wonder if dragons are also supposed to represent the first ever A group. Just a thought. As for Kingdra, it gets a new final move with Wave Crash, in theme with lore on Kingdra that tells of their abilities to cause massive storms that will cause great turmoil in the seas and cause entire ships to be destroyed in their wake. This then, in turn, makes a rivalry between it and Dragonite, as the orange dragon is a guardian of others on the waters of the world. For Seaking, it's clear why they have to finish with Mega Horn and Horn Drill. I mean, look at that thing on its forehead. But more than this, their horns are important for not just defending their territories, but also for literally drilling through and breaking up underwater rock so they can lay their eggs in a safe space. Also, will not be surprised if a good horn is seen as an attractive trait for mates. Starmie closes with Recover and Hydro Pump, the attack just being a staple of our marine creatures as we're finding out, which is why it's important to then look at moves prior to their final moves and why we look at Recover. Not only are starfish capable of regenerating lost limbs, but of course Staryu and Starmie are as well. Even more than this, they have been noted to not care about other creatures eating their limbs as long as their core isn't eaten. Whether this means they feel no pain is up in the air, but I'd like to assume they aren't masochists. The entire Mr.Mime line and its Galarian variants all end with Dazzling Gleam and Psychic, representative of not only their performative nature, but also of their mystical psychic abilities. But when we take one more step back again, we see that Mr. Mime picks up Mystical Fire, while Galarian Mr. Mime and Mr. Rhyme get Freeze Dry instead. But why though, other than the, opposite types? Like, I get it. The Galarian line has their special shoe feet that let them freeze the ground and continue their fight dancing as they flex on their foes with fancy footwork, but to then give mystical fire to a Mr.Mime is something that caught me off guard. Well, once again, we look at the direct translation of the name, and we just get Magical Fire, an attack completed by breathing a special hot flame out at its foes, which I would then once again equate to a performer or a magic trick, bringing us full circle. The Scyther line is just playing rock, paper, scissors with each other in a very direct way. All of them have the same base stat totals, they all learn X Scissors and Swords Dance, but their tertiary moves, or rather third to last move, are Air Slash, Iron Head, and Rock Slide, each one being super effective on another as they play their game of three-way rock, paper, scissors with equal stats. Except Scizor is a bit unfair since Iron Head has 5 more points of base damage over the other two, and a Rock Slide would actually do 4 times damage against Scyther, so whatever, do with that information what you will. Jinx sings you to your final demise, or at least approaches you while singing in whiteout conditions, as the Snow Queen she's called within Galar has her final moves as Perish Song and Blizzard. Though there are many singing phenomena in the world, from singing deserts to singing heard in the singing ice of Lake Baikal. Extreme temperature changes forces ice to expand, contract, crack, you name it. This then results in sounds that have been described as loud booms, eerie noises in general, or of course, singing. I tried finding it, or like an example of this, even though I've heard plenty of similar sounds in Wisconsin, but then I found a video of people using the ice like freaking drums, and it's amazing! Not what I expected at all, but I'm here for it. You could also easily tie this to Jinx swinging her hips and hearing a drum beat as she walks, but that's neither here nor there, believe what you will. Elekid finishing with thunder is an easy reference to their species running around in thunderstorms, waiting to get blasted by the hand of Zeus in order to get their happy fill of electricity. What's more interesting is that with Electabuzz and Electivire, they close out with Giga Impact. It seems meaningless with Electabuzz, even though it has also been shown to have an incredibly powerful punch in the manga, but rather when it does evolve into Electivire, it not only becomes a physical attacker, but it's a fun potential pun. While it only releases 20,000 volts of electricity from its tails, it is stated to be able to release higher levels, and we could connect it to Gigavolt, Giga Impact, which would be 1 million volts of electricity. In addition, its dex entries state that when it gets excited, it thumps its chest. With every thud then, thunder roars and electric sparks shower all around. So, I think it'd be pretty dope to imagine that despite it being a normal type move, a Giga Impact attack could have been supercharged with millions of volts of electric power, and they really pack a literal punch. Nothing crazy to say about Magby and Magmar, as their finisher is Fire Blast. We might say that it ties to their connection with volcanoes and living within them for long periods of time, but you could also tie them to yokai and many other vague ideas. What really attracts my attention is that Magmortar finishes with Hyper Beam, which, to be fair, while it is said to blast fireballs from its cannon, you'd expect a laser to shoot out of those instead. In addition, from Dex entries, it states when shooting 3600 degree Fahrenheit fireballs from its arms, its body takes on a whitish hue from the intense heat. At these temperatures, you'd also expect to see a blue flame, a very light blue flame, almost white. And I was ready to tie this into Hyper Beam's color, but that changes in color depending on the game, with the only common denominator then being white at the center. So sure, the type of light blue you'd see at the base of a hot flame could match with that, but it's just better to look at the cannon and say, yeah, someone just wanted lasers to shoot out of it. I'd say that Pinsir's final 3 moves are the exact moves we'd see when it is fighting for mates or territory, mimicking the type of conflicts that we would see with stag beetles, which it is based on. First, a lunge, then a clashing of pincers with sword dance, which is also represented through their last move of close combat, as they struggle to fight back and forth for dominance, and maybe even to throw their opponent far away. Think of it like a pair of wrestlers whose arms have been transformed into swords, and the analogy becomes easier and weirder in an instant. Every Tauros mixes things up a bit as they reach the end of their natural move lists. Starting with the OG, it's once again very much like a bull fighting for mates or within a bullfighting ring. It has swagger, which it is using to taunt the foe, to make them angrier and think less before they attack. when the fight does break out and they hit someone or something to the ground, they will thrash, stomping and jumping over and over. Double Edge just represents the charge itself, and potentially taking damage in turn, but it could be a pun with the 2 horns on its head. And of course, it closes with Giga Impact, which is that one final big knocking of heads together, which produces a crack that will make a chill go down your spine. Their Paldean form will switch out Giga Impact for close combat, using its short horns to strike out weak spots, as they are noted to excel at close quarters combat directly into decks, so of course they just give it close combat to tie that closed. Now in Blaze Breed, it still ends with Swagger, Thrash, and close combat, but the semi-final move is actually replaced from Double Edge and turned into Flare Blitz, the charging bull setting itself aflame and pushing forward. Similarly, we have the Aqua Breed having Wave Crash, and they both have these moves for similar real-life cultural reasons. In the past, we would find that Spain would hold bullfighting competitions, but instead of leaving them in an easy arena, they took it to the next level, and I don't think they do it anymore. Though, now I will also note, I do not condone bullfighting where the bull gets injured. If a human wants to get in that ring, then that's on you, pal. Go be cool. That's awesome. And try not to die, but do not hurt the bull. Now, it was called Toro Embolado in Catalan, basically meaning bull with balls, and balls would be balls of flammable material, which would then be placed on bull horns and then lit aflame, as it then would be released into the streets or arena for participants to dodge, thus giving us flame charge. Then alternative to this, there's the bull run, where it just wasn't 1 or 2 bulls, but many bulls and many participants racing through Spain to outrun their demise by stampede. At the end of the run, they would be able to escape, but the bulls would run into the waters around Spain, crashing into the waves of the water, which then of course gives us the Wave Crash move. As a note, I know I could have just highlighted the best of the best like this one with the video, but I want that full documentation. I want to go through all the Pokemon, and you could probably tell I'm not going through all 1052, I think it is, Pokemon today. But don't worry, we're getting through Gen 1 and their variants and all their evolutions, and then we're going to get those intro Pokemon that I talked about. I want to go through more generations in the future and really give them their time. So let me know you want to see more of this by just raising the number of likes in the video as an easy vote. Magikarp only has Splash, Tackle, and Flail in that order. No better than a fish breaking out of the water as it learns to fight back or jumps at something and then flounders on land, which I will say is weird because Magikarp can live outside of the water for a very long time, and the anime even depicts it jumping into space. When it evolves into Gyarados, it really takes on the embodiment of being the disaster its Pokédex describes it as. A rampaging monster that will destroy everything around it before leaving. With its last 4 moves, it decimates the lands. Hydro Pump to flood the area. Hurricane to bring about a greater disaster as the winds whip and howl. How strong the hurricane is something I don't know, and we can only hope it's not an F5, because that's genuinely terrifying. Next, it is thrashing about in its rage, which Thrash is a move you do get locked into while dealing great damage, so no shocker there. And finally, if somehow something manages to live throughout all of that, it ends with Hyper Beam that will disintegrate anything that it blasts. It is interesting that after Hyper Beam, it does have to rest for a turn, so I wonder if it's also supposed to represent Gyarados running out of energy and flying away, and I do mean that literally. I forget that there's a lot of tiny trivia out there that people don't know, and Gyarados can just straight up fly through the air. You are not safe wherever you go from this Pokemon. Maybe I'll make a little, video about the most useless bits of trivia I know about Pokemon one day, like Absol appearing on routes just outside of where many legendary Pokemon are found. Lapras is considered a very powerful Pokemon, at least within lore, and if Blue says it in the manga that it is powerful, I'm inclined to believe it, but our marine reptile of a Pokemon's final moves are Perish Song and Sheer Cold. Perish Song easily represents the singing that this Pokemon likes to do, which extends to many facets of its life. When happy, it sings. They sing in groups together and will even sing to their children, which we can see in the anime and in Pokemon Snap. A sad point by the Ultra Moon Dex is that they sing to also find the last of their kind before their populations were eventually restored. But the real danger is their one-hit KO move, Sheer Cold, which in direct translation is just called Absolute Zero, which is so much cooler. We might see Lapras around beaches,
but these definitely seem more like points of migration or pass-through areas than their actual homes, which we can not only support through low encounter rates, meaning lower population, but also when we look at Blueberry Academy, we see them in droves within the Arctic section. In other words, they have the capacity to adapt to warmer areas, but they are at their best in the cold, places where we can reach absolute zero regularly. Well, okay, maybe not absolute zero, but you get what I mean. I'm being a little dramatic. This would be the Arctic world. It is an ice type after all. Ditto has only ever been known to learn and know transform within the games, but if you thought I was just going to leave it there, you're wrong. Because at least within the TCG trading card game, you get a Ditto that has Energy Ball and 2 different Ditto that know Pound, with one of them belonging to Koga. I think it's at least worth considering, since Pound is just your body weight being used to fight, and Energy Ball does draw energy from nature, and after seeing all that Pokopia has to offer, of course we can see Ditto is very in tune and important to nature itself. That's also my way of saying Pokopia video very soon. I just beat it myself a few days before recording this, and I'm just itching to get the script done. Moving on to Eevee and the Eeveelutions, I sat around trying to figure out why Eevee ends with Last Resort for a while. I looked at move list composition, counted to see if it learned more non-damaging moves than it does damaging moves, so on and so forth, only to find out that Last Resort is just called the best in direct translation. Because of course, not only would this be a move that has to be used last, but it is also their best final shot. And it might be an easy reference to Eevee being one of the most popular Pokemon of all time. Say what you will, but while many people bag on Pikachu and Charizard, I think I've only ever heard 2 people insult Eevee and its line, and even then they just say, yeah, I don't really know if it's overrated. It's, you know, pretty hype still. It is arguably the true second mascot of the franchise, since in the original Yellow game where you could have gotten an Eevee only for your rival to have been suspected of taking it. It was then revived through the Let's Go games, and we were able to choose through our choice of game whether we got Pikachu or Eevee, of course. So it's been theoretically the second mascot for all this time. Giving it the move, the best, is a seemingly strong reference to this. Now, getting into the Eeveelutions, all of them end in Last Resort, considering it is also the move that allows them, or rather Eevee, to use the Z move Extreme Evo Boost, which combines the power of their 9 different forms into Eevee. It really is a lend me your energy anime moment, and yes, I'm considering Eevee one of the 9 forms. But before we get into that point, we have 2 moves for each Pokemon that gives us our move list lore. For starters, Vaporeon gets Acid Armor and Hydro Pump. The latter is obvious, but Acid Armor is incredibly unique in that it is actually called Liquefy in direct translation. We can see this through not only Vaporeon being able to liquefy and blend in with the water perfectly, since it is mostly made of water, but it can even do this anywhere else, even in small puddles, as we see it effectively disappear in the manga in such a cool way. Yes, I know I'm glazing the manga a lot, but I can't help it. For Jolteon, it has Agility and Thunder, just simply representing its incredible speed and the power of electricity that it holds command over. Might also be a slight reference to it being considered a very sensitive Pokemon whose mood changes easily and quickly as per the Pokédex. Flareon somehow gets Scary Face and Flare Blitz, which again, Flare Blitz makes sense as its entire body is known to be incredibly warm, even when not fighting, but Scary Face? This thing? Do you not see how adorable you are and how much people want to just fall asleep with their face buried in your fur? The only thing I can assume is that Flareon kinda does have a different demeanor to it when we look at its head and its stance, whereas every other evolution has its head high, has a smile, has wide eyes, or something more open and friendly about them, and their stance. Flareon is the only one that is stanced up ready for battle immediately in art. It has its head tilted down, and its head fluff makes it kinda look like it's scowling a bit. If that isn't the reason, then I don't know what is. Espeon is at least easy since it has Psych Up and Future Sight, with Psych Up actually being called Self-Suggest in direct translation, or psyching yourself up is how we could also see it. This makes it clear that it's not technically about directly increasing psychic abilities, it's actually about giving yourself the pep talk that actually ends up working, hyping yourself up. It's basically, again, encouraging itself to use more power and then see the future, whether that be in battle or elsewhere. Though you might also consider that it's sitting in the sun to increase its power before using this. Umbreon honestly seems so very sad since it ends with Screech and Mean Look. Even the outlier move of Snarl that it has doesn't help, but at the end of the day, Umbreon is meant to be a hunter, a creature of the night hunting for prey. we do have dex entries which support its intimidating behavior that directly say, when darkness falls, the rings on the body begin to glow, striking fear in the hearts of anyone nearby, and its large eyes can pierce the darkness and perceive prey with absolute clarity. So sure, that makes a lot more sense, but those are some hard moves to end on that aren't really fitting or helping its typing. Leafeon has Swords Dance and Leaf Blade, which are easily explained by one dex entry. Its hardtail can fell a large tree with one stroke, and the tail's sharpness exceeds even that of a sword crafted by a master. A wild adaptation from an otherwise unassuming and peaceful Pokemon that basks in the sunlight and photosynthesizes. Glaceon closes with Mirror Coat and Blizzard, showing off that it does cause powdery snow to form just from the cold that emanates from its body, but that its fur would also be covered in the snow that it produces to give it that icy sheen, all allowing it to mechanically create snowstorms and blend in with them even better. Finally, Sylveon has Psych Up just like Espeon, though it follows that up with Moonblast, a classic staple of fairy Pokemon, but it does go even deeper than this, because in the night it is given legend that a terrifying and dreadful dragon was defeated by Sylveon. This is made clear through official art that it was Hydreigon, as they are both bathed in moonlight. I will also say that that legend wasn't released until Galar, so it could have been an internal story until then, or it could just be a story that gives us more storytelling to our moves as an additional later tale. In addition, I just realized that Psych Up actually relates to not it psyching itself up, but that its feelers are able to calm the emotions of others, maybe even making people feel better, improving their psyche. Which one's your favorite evolution? I've been a big fan of Jolteon and Umbreon for years, but Sylveon has really risen up in the ranks for me, especially since my Sylveon named Mochi saved my Ultra Moon Blind Nuzlocke, a horrifying and beautiful moment throughout that whole endeavor, and yes, I do have a supercut on this channel of that. Porygon is very strange, as I have to actually look at the last 5 or so moves it learns to get the full picture of it and its forms. For a regular Porygon, Tri-Attack is the 4th to last move, a representative of electric, fire, and ice type attacks that I've always associated with more mechanical creatures, but apparently that isn't always the case, as we see in Pokemon like Dugtrio and Dodrio, but at least there's 3 of them. And the rest of the Pokemon are Steel types, or Pokemon that have close relationships with humans, from the Lake Guardians to Genesect, Silvally, Magearna, and more. There are still some other outliers such as Terapagos, but it's clear why the little turtle has this. And to follow, Porygon does have Double Edge, because, has a lot of geometric edges to its body. Then it finishes with Lock On and Zap Cannon, just as the Magnemite line did, a very robotic way of going about combat. But when it evolves into Porygon 2, it finishes with Hyper Beam instead. No shocker that the man-made robot's last move is a big ol' laser beam. But before Gen 9, Porygon's signature move was Conversion, and while it would switch its typing to match the targets, this is representative of downloading and then implementing data. If this were the anime, we would see that Porygon could use this data as it deemed fit in the future, almost like a Ditto with perfect memory. I also say this because in the one and only episode we currently have of Porygon, you know the one, it was transforming its shape and texture as it deemed fit for the battle against Team Rocket, and the fun part is that the move Conversion is literally named Texture in direct translation. Unfortunately though, the wrong data gets put into Porygon, and as it reaches its Z state, it gets all sorts of goofed up. I did hear that you can get it in Pokopia, and it's definitely worse when you get to see its dialogue, which makes me feel really bad for it. Shell Smash, Hydro Pump, Omastar is like a creature pushed into a corner, or even breaking its own limiter before going all out. Although for a creature like this and many others that learn Shell Smash, this would be a death sentence. An Ammonite, the creature that Ammonite and Omastar are inspired by, and the fossil I hold in my hands, would be born with a tiny shell. This shell would be expanded on, from center out as we currently see it, as the Ammonite grows, and they close the smaller chambers behind them as they live primarily in the chambers closest to the opening. So theoretically speaking, as long as it only destroyed every other chamber except for the most recent one or two, then this Pokemon could destroy the rest of the shell without hurting itself, lowering the weight on its body, and then go all out. And no, I'm not destroying this fossil as a visual example. It might only be valued at like $30 or $40 monetarily, but it's the first ever I got my hands on, and I do really love my fossils. I need to get myself some like crinoids to represent Lileep and some other fossil bits for other dino Pokemon one day. Maybe when I visit the field exhibit for the Pokemon Field Museum. Metal Sound and Stone Edge for Kabuto and Kabutops. Stone Edge not only sounds close to Stone Age, which denotes their ancient lives, even though they've been around for like way longer. Meanwhile, for Metal Sound, my mind immediately thinks of Kabutops striking its sides together as a warning to those getting too close to its territory. The last sound you would hear before it would strike. Their cries are a bit on the higher pitch. First, I'll give you Kabuto, and then I'll give you Kabutops. But I don't think that this is the reason why it gets it. It has to be the claws or sides. Though, I don't know about you, but whenever I see a horseshoe crab, I just kind of imagine them screeching in the highest pitch whenever they're bothered. They don't do that at all, from what I understand, but it's still the first thing I imagine every single time for some reason. Aerodactyl's grand finale is Hyper Beam and Giga Impact. Moves in equal 150 base power, both moves needing a recharge afterwards, and the move agility is learned right before them. It's almost like Aerodactyl speeds into the sky before raining destruction down on its foes and then crashing into them as they pick up their meal. This may have legitimately been its hunting method in the past, known as one of the most powerful ancient Pokemon we've been made aware of, and King of the Skies at the very least. This actually puts into perspective how terrifying it may have been once it has chosen a target, which, to be fair, we do see its might in both the Two Heroes movie and in Pokemon Journeys, and it is a beast. Especially the Two Heroes one, where it's larger and they take away its pupils, making it far more monstrous. Snorlax had me laughing again, just like Muck, and you can tell why pretty quickly as it finishes with Hammer Arm, which is it slamming its arm down on whatever meal it sees before it and eating it, following with Belly Drum as it is satisfied even momentarily for its meal, has the Belch move for obvious reasons, and then it finishes with Giga Impact, with Giga Impact specifically being needed as well for its Z move as it transforms into Pulverizing Pancake or Go All Out Attack, meaning that Snorlax is literally just fueling up before giving it his all in one last massive attack that uses up all of its energy, and it then has to restart the cycle. God, I love this Pokemon so much. Also know I should have started with Munchlax, but all it has is Double Edge and Giga Impact, which follows this idea, though right before those it has high horsepower, so it might be moving incredibly fast and trampling others when it sees food that it really wants. We're of course going to shift gears before we get into those legendary Pokemon, because I have a trio of Pokemon I teased you about in the intro of this video, starting with Phantump and Trevenant. On one hand, Phantump has Woodhammer, Destiny Bond, and closes with Forest's Curse. This is Phantump's way of risking its physical body to protect the forest that it loves, and when that fails, it decides that it would take you with it when it inevitably passes away, since it already took part of its own life away with Woodhammer. Although, if it can, it would instead impose the Forest's Curse on you, turning you into a grass type. This sounds pretty mundane at first until you think of the deeper implication that it may actually be turning you into a tree as part of this process. After all, people who follow Phantump or people that Trevenant traps in the forest are never seen again. But we're never told they die like we see in dex entries of other Pokemon. So what if people are actively transformed into trees, poetically now making up the forest that they once sought to destroy? Now, Trevenant's moves are a little bit different, having its final moves in order as Forest's Curse, Phantom Force, Woodhammer, and then ending with Curse. It can't even learn Destiny Bond naturally upon level up, meaning that it no longer has to use it as a last resort, instead being able to take full advantage of its Revenant's powers and phase through objects and foes while laying curses on them and waiting for them to become one with the forest as their life depletes, or they turn into a tree. I think this whole discovery moved it way up my rankings because this is amazing and horrifying. Metal Sound and Future Sight are Bronzor's final moves, with Metal Sound coming in clear due to its literal metal body and even its cry. I didn't make that pun on purpose. Either way, Future Sight is more than just due to it being a psychic type. It's because you can actually polish the back of Bronzor and see your future. This is something originally only said in the Pokédex, and I didn't believe it was fully real until I saw it happen in the anime, and I was just blown away. Don't get me wrong, I should just believe the Pokédex sometimes, but there are so many different lies that the Pokédex itself does state, which To be fair, it's things that it just gets wrong and has to be reworked in future generations, because that's how science works, baby. It's proven to be right until you keep testing it with new and reliable equipment and methods that continue to give us a result that may continue to line up with the previous answer, or give us a brand new reproducible answer that we then take as fact. Meanwhile, of all things, Bronzong's final move is Rain Dance, which is explained fully through Dex entries stating that it was worshipped as a deity that would bring bountiful harvest to people. It likely did this through its other described trait of opening portals to other worlds and summoning rain clouds. There is not, I guarantee, not a single other channel or person that even talks about this as even an obscure fact. Every person I told about this before making this video was baffled until I explained it, and it was this Pokemon that sent me on this path of figuring out move list stories. But I will say it was our next Pokemon that was technically the first move list story I had ever found out back when I used to rate Pokemon in shorts and before yours truly was even close to being partnered on YouTube. And that would be Misdreavus and Mismagius. On one hand, Misdreavus learns a good list of moves through Level Up. It finishes with Perish Song and Power Gem, with Perish Song being representative of the loud cries and wails that it releases to scare others so it can consume their literal emotion of fear. With Power Gem, it actually represents the red beads that line its neck. These beads are incredibly important because they convert the fear that is released into consumable energy for our Pokemon here. It's also implied in Pokemon Stadium that Mismagius emerges from and goes back into these beads when it faints. Although when it does evolve, it only has 7 moves to choose from immediately at level 1, with the greatest outlier being Phantom Force. And I feel like the focus should not be there, but rather the incredibly short list that is then absolutely overshadowed by an incredibly long list of TMs that it can learn now. Mismagius is a mage, a witch if you would, and so it makes perfect sense that it would be able to learn so many different moves through TM, as it is just like a witch having to learn its incantations. We're in the final stretch as we talk about our legendary Pokemon, starting with Articuno and its Galarian form. Articuno comes in like a blizzard storm, that it really is, quite literally. Hurricane for the gale force, blistering cold winds, haze for the whiteout conditions that its storm brings, the blizzard itself that approaches as it is the eye of the storm using blizzard, and then finally sheer cold, representative of the peak of cold power once again, as Articuno represents winter itself. But when we get its Galarian form, it still enters the scene with Hurricane, but then it shows off its psychic prowess with Double Team, Future Sight, and Trick Room as its finale. The Double Team makes me think of high speeds or illusions, otherwise even representing the idea that both Articunos might actually be one and the same. Then with the other 2 moves, Future Sight is a classic, but why Trick Room? Especially as its speed actually increases from normal Articuno into this Galarian form. Well, by comparison, it is still in the top 180 fastest Pokemon, but that's still comparatively fairly slow and not being known for speed. And when we compare it though to Zapdos and Moltres and their Galarian forms, it is already faster than Moltres, but it is slower than Zapdos, meaning that depending on the fight, Trick Room will allow it to turn the tides and always stay fast enough to avoid the super effective attacks of its colleagues as they race for the Dynafruit. Speaking of Zapdos, Thunder, for obvious reasons, Detect because it has reflexes as fast as lightning, and while Zap Cannon is its closer, the semi-final move is Magnetic Flux, which is, in literal translation, magnetic field manipulation, increasing the defense and special defense of itself and any allies with the ability plus or minus. This absolutely represents Zapdos' ability to shoot lightning off into the sky and induce thunderstorms, while in turn being able to get struck by lightning that will then fuel it. Because of this, it basically becomes more and more powerful as the battle goes on, though unless we wanted to give it Beast Boost, we're kind of skipping around that as a powerful idea to make it, way overpowered and bring in its greater heights of power within the games. Its Galarian form switching in electricity for fighting capabilities, but not before it has a lightning fast kick that's called Thunderous or Thunderclap Kick. Now I'm just kind of imagining Zenitsu as Galarian Zapdos, and even the colors actually match up. Though that's its mid-range move. Instead, it finishes with Detect, Close Combat, and finally Reversal, which is a new closer. This is an attack that is stronger and stronger as the user has lower and lower HP, even being described as having the potential to turn the tide of battle. This really is just an anime character getting its second wind after the enemy beats it to near death. There's nothing else to really say here. Finally, Moltres also has Hurricane, but the final 3 moves are Endure, Overheat, and Sky Attack. It is going up against Zapdos with the type advantage, and when we look at Overheat, it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Although, we could also compare it to when it takes baths inside of volcanoes in order to restore its health, meaning if it is just exposed to enough heat, it will continually heal. Also, once more, I was caught off guard because Sky Attack, as its final, is so vague and simple. Why is it here? Well, of course, its direct translation is God Bird. This was the signature move of Moltres for a very short time, but that really does open the door to the idea of our legendary Pokemon being gods, or rather, they were great and powerful kami, which I do have a nice deep dive on that you can check out, called the Biblical Apocalypse of Pokemon, and before anyone says it, kami does mean god. Technically, it's more like Great Spirit, Guardian Spirit, so on and so forth. But with visuals that remind people of the Phoenix, it's no surprise that a godly name would be given to Moltres. Its Galarian form, on the other hand, replaces fire for darkness, and while it still holds Hurricane, Endure, and Sky Attack, Overheat is instead replaced with Memento, a burning and lingering scar that is left on its opponents, as it is known to drain them of vitality as long as it is or was in their presence. Although, this is also represented through Fiery Wrath, its currently signature Dark-type move that allows this Pokemon to transform its Wrath into a fire-like aura to attack. God, I feel like a weeb, but like, this dude is just using hockey. Like, what do you want from me? To lie and say anything else? Nah, this is a hockey bird. It's time for our pseudo-legendary of the generation, and there's only one difference in the last quartet of moves that Dragonite and its line has. While Dratini and Dragonair have Rain Dance, Dragon Dance, Outrage, and Hyper Beam, Dragonite slips in a Safeguard between Outrage and Rain Dance. This is explained by this line being heavily associated with water, and Dragonite specifically being regarded as a guardian of the seas, going as far as even protecting and saving people and Pokemon from turbulent, life-risking waters, whether that be natural or from Kingdra's influence. The line is also shown in many different forms of media to be outright terrifying, Dragonite more so in animation than the others when it does reach its breaking point, becoming incredibly angry and entering a complete rage that will not end until the thing that hurt what it cares about is destroyed. We also get to see the coolest visual of something like this with Dragonair in the manga, and I've never seen these Pokemon as scary design-wise until then. Lastly, Hyper Beam is just another way for them to completely erase their targets from a distance, much like Gyarados, who was also on Lance's team in the manga, who also blew up an entire section of a city. This is me saying once again, you should go read the manga or listen to my coverage of it. I love it too much. But we're finally at Mewtwo, and every time I talk about it, I have to resist the Doofenshmirtz quote I did forever ago, but I'm not resisting today. For first I will take over Mewtwo, then I will take over the entire tri-state area. A stupid little meme from over 2 years ago before I really started making Pokemon content. Now Mewtwo finishes with some interesting power: Mist, Psy Strike, Recover, and Future Sight. Mist first allows its stats to not be decreased by status moves unless Mewtwo is switched out, which, newsflash, Mewtwo in the wild is never switching out. Psy Strike, also called Psycho Break, has been the signature move of Mewtwo since Generation 5, which is wild to say out loud. Instead of attacking the mind with psychic power, it affects the physical body itself and causes damage there, transforming the power into something new in the process. Recover is just another way for Mewtwo to keep itself alive from all the battling it has done and the many people who may try to catch it. Although, since it was built with Mew's DNA, you could say that it is regenerating cells in that fashion. This is something we could really take to heart when we look at the manga through its connection to Blaine and how Mewtwo's body does need to recover and be stabilized within a chamber, as it can't survive outside of said chamber for very long, at least early on. Lastly, Future Sight, belonging to the most powerful psychic Pokemon of all time, in lore at least, is nothing short of perfection. Being able to see the future is an ability that we attribute to the strongest or the smartest, so of course, it's with Mewtwo. Our final Pokemon for today is Mew, the ancestor of quote-unquote all Pokemon. and its move list is actually so insane that I actually want to cover all of it. Pound is simple, but it has mirror type, so it can copy the typings of the target, which of course, all typings technically come from Mew, as it has all the genetics of many Pokemon within it. Amnesia, because it is a bit of a carefree Pokemon until trouble arrives, as even when faced with danger, it goofs around so much. It gets Baton Pass from all the times it is teleported away from people and other Pokemon. Ancient Power, because of course, it is one of the most ancient Pokemon of all time, and at level 40, it gets Life Dew. By the way, everything after the first 2 moves are learned in increments of 10. So Amnesia is at 10, Baton Pass 20, Ancient Power 30, so on and so forth. Life Dew uses Mysterious Water that restores the HP of anyone hit by it, which of course relates back to all life originating on Earth from water itself. We follow this with Nasty Plot, not because of anything other than it being a playful Pokemon that is constantly getting into mischief. Metronome, because once again chaos and the ability to use any move. And then the wild card, Imprison. This Pokemon has the moves of every single other Pokemon within it, so outside of the game with this move's mechanics, it could theoretically use Imprison and just stop its opponents from using any moves whatsoever. It can, of course, then fully transform into any other Pokemon because, again, DNA is within it. Then, at level 90, it has Aura Sphere, which lines up perfectly with Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, and how these Pokemon are tied together in that movie, or how Aura is effectively life energy of all things in the world. So much so that Lucario gave up all of its aura to save Mew and the Tree of Life. Then finally, at level 100, it learns Psychic. Of course, just being that classic psychokinetic force that it emanates to hurt opponents. Mew really exemplifies that it is the origin species of most life that we have been made aware of through psychic power, aura, ancient power DNA, and the ability to just transform into Pokemon or use their moves without even transforming. I was not ready to close out on such a cool move list, and I hope you thought that that was just as cool or interesting. But that does conclude what we have for today. I'll visit this again in the future and work through more Pokemon, but I think this video is already long enough as is. If you enjoyed and are new, please do make sure that you do subscribe. It's a nice metric to see go up, and likes on the video tell me that you want to see more videos like this sooner. Let me know also which move list was your favorite or you were surprised by. And one more thank you, I will say, to members of the channel who you see on the screen now. If you want behind the scenes info, early access to videos, and members exclusive videos, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It goes a long way. The best comment from the past week was from Dakota Jones, who commented on an older video where I had zero script and ranked the edibility of Pokemon. I must have said I would eat Avalugg, but that's a major mistake because, as they explain, there's a lot of really bad ancient viruses and bacteria frozen in that ice that will absolutely decimate us, at least in glaciers specifically. So, don't do that. Up next, though, yours truly is going to release a video on solving Pokopia, because I'll tell you now, nobody on YouTube is solving it like I am. But with that, then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.